Yeah, thanks, Lori. Leave it to the consultant to give you the big picture to start with. So the really big picture to start with is, unfortunately, the existing system of financing impact entrepreneurs is broken. It's not working. Um, that's the really, really, really big picture. We did some work last year with the Swiss Development Corporation where we estimated just in low and middle income countries that there's a roughly $50 billion a year financing gap for social enterprises, a subcategory of small and growing businesses. And that gap, unfortunately, I don't think we've closed in the last year. So, the reason that gap exists is primarily because there's a dearth of understanding from the external parties about the geographies, about the business models, about the motivations of the founders, as well as the time horizon and financing needs of these impact-driven enterprises. And existing financial intermediaries that invest in them also face challenging raising and allocating capital to place into those enterprises because of weak economics, small volumes, ticket sizes, and high transaction costs. And then at the other end of the spectrum, the big holders of capital, which sometimes can be our clients too, and need to be part of the ecosystem, the pension funds, insurance companies, et cetera, are not incentivized or structured to be able to place capital into this system. And they shy away from directing capital here because they don't match with their fiduciary duties. They don't have the time horizons, don't provide the return profiles that more liquid strategies offer them. And so they continually shy away from investing in this space. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is that we're seeing rapid evolution in terms of how financing is being done to impact enterprises writ large. It has started with the broad recognition that traditional tools of finance, grants, debt, and equity are not necessarily always well positioned to actually serve the needs of impact-driven enterprises, and that we need to, hybridize or play with them a little bit to make them work in many cases. And this can be through customized financing products. It can be through alternative financing structures, which often include blending. And we'll get into that later, what blending means. So that's sort of the big picture step back. In terms of trends, it's a little bit hard to answer. There's no definitive database that tells you what the evolution of the way capital is moving in this space. But I think I can look at this from three perspectives. First, what's the data that's available telling us? And here, for example, if I look at Convergence, which is the organization that looks at the blended finance in specific, which is a sub-archetype of innovative financing. Unfortunately, the data for the most recent State of the Sector report, which just came out last month, showed a nearly 40% drop in the value of blended finance investing from 2021 to 2022. Now, that's just pure value, like the total dollar amount. We're actually seeing an increase in uptick in activity, but that's still not a great sign to see the actual, in a time when we think financing is increasing, and we're hearing these big numbers and impact investing going up, but we're seeing the actual blended finance value dollar amount go down. At the same time, if I look at other sources of information, some of our partners, we see that things like outcome-linked financing, and I can explain what that is in a bit later, are increasing rapidly. Just in the last 2 years, just from our awareness, there's been 40 plus new impact-linked financing structures or vehicles created across the globe. And so that's also very promising. However, that's just the data. Now, if I think anecdotally, like many of you probably in the audience, and Chintan and Lori, you go to the conferences, gosh, anecdotally, what I hear is the language, the lingo, what people are talking about is all about how do we better tailor financing to meet the needs of enterprises, particularly impact-driven enterprises. Impact is mainstreaming, and therefore I'm seeing anecdotally, at least, a feeling that this sector is growing, that there's greater interest and there's greater passion and momentum. And I guess lastly, what I would say is from my client experience, and I roughly do about, let's say, 20 or so advisory projects a year. In the last 3 years, I've seen an increased percentage of those projects go specifically towards questions around vehicle design or tailoring products, or how do we better match the needs, whether it's climate adaptation or a small business growth or a gender-led strategy in low and middle income countries. So there's just an uptick in demand I'm seeing for payable advisory work in this space. So it also gives me heart to know that there's the potential this is growing. But yet I think the big picture still holds. There's a huge financing gap, and we've got a long way to go.